All right, so we're going to go over the etiology or the models of addiction. They're basically the same thing, or what the premises of the theory of addiction, right? So there's all these different models of how addiction comes to be. How does it come to fruition? How do we become addicted to something? And the first one is this moral model. That is an old view that we've unfortunately continued to keep as a stigma. And when we did the activity in class with stereotypes, you remember that the first thing that came up was that was something that was very stereotypical. And so we still get really angry at people with addiction. We still look at it as a moral failing. And even in the 12 steps, that's one of the 12 steps. And it's that it's a failing. And I'm excited to talk about this more with everyone and see what you think. But there's still really an inherent moral quality that we ascribe to addiction. And for those of you right now, if you've failed or you felt like you relapsed while you're in this abstinence project, you may have felt bad about who you are. And that as a society, we've done a really poor job of helping people feel okay when they actually relapse. And if you ever think about a New Year's resolution, most people cannot do that. They fail. And so when we set a goal to stop doing or start doing something, it is really hard to change that behavior. And then we have the medical model. And this is an implicit component of 12-step programs, right? That this is a disease. It's viewed as the primary disease, not secondary to any other condition. And I wonder what everyone in class thinks about that. I'm sure you know what my view is, but I won't talk about that yet. The American Medical Association actually recognized alcoholism as a disease in 1956, and then E.M. Jelinek came up with something called the Jelinek curve in 1950 that I still find very useful when I work with addiction. It shows the progression of addiction and the disease, and then it shows the recovery phase. So it's almost like the reverse bell curve, and I will draw it in class. You can Google it as well, and we'll talk about that. But basically, you go through a series of stages of addiction or alcoholism in the Jelinek curve, and it progresses from early to middle to later chronic, and through each stage you get worse. In the early stage of the medical model is where clients, and we're talking about alcoholism, right, with Jelinek, because illicit drug use, opium, cocaine was in Coca-Cola at that time, and in the 20s, and in the 60s, of course, we had all the drugs that are coming back now, LSD and mushrooms and MDMA in the 70s. Those are all going to be FDA approved for treatment. So it's funny. It's just a funny time to be talking about this. But at this time, really in the 50s, alcoholism was the premier thing, that substance we were dealing with. And then, of course, people were smoking, didn't know the effects of that at that point. But so when they're drinking in the early stage, they start to have a higher tolerance. This can go on for a very long time. So when you see clients in the early stage of addiction or alcoholism, the negative really hasn't outweighed the positive. It's really hard to assist clients in the early stage because they can't see how it's impacting their life yet. They maybe haven't been arrested or haven't done anything against their morals and values. They might be sneaking some drinks, but it's not impacting their day-to-day life. They have maybe some guilt, but they're really in that pre-contemplation to contemplation stage of change model. Sip of coffee. Okay. Then we move over to this middle phase. And this is where clients or people we know begin to lose control of their drinking. This is where they think, okay, I'm only going to have a couple drinks at the party, and then they black out. Or, everybody goes to bed and that person stays up and drinks until they have a hangover. They start to prioritize the drug or the drink at this phase over other activities with friends or family, and they have to have that supply and they're very protective of it and would feel uncomfortable maybe if they ran out of their alcohol. But just a real sort of a loss of control, right? This is where the negative starts to outweigh the positive, and then you get to what is like called the disaster phase, and in it's Hazelton's model, I think. I'll talk about that in class, but and you get in the disaster phase or the later chronic phase. In this description, in the disaster phase, this is where the negative fully outweighs the positive. They're starting to have to use to not go into DTs. They're starting to have a lot of health and psychological issues at work, violating morals and values, etc. And that's a good time to get people into treatment. Stages are progressive and they're affected by the age of the person, of course, what they're using, their gender, their tolerance level, and what other psychological issues, like what predisposed mental health issues could be going on, medical issues. And like I said, somebody can be in early or middle for a while and maintain just fine until they get to that late chronic phase, which that's typically when family comes in and we work on getting them into detox. Because most times a family, they don't recognize it either because they're busy and they might know, but they don't really know. So if they're maintaining and going to work and, kind of maintaining their life and nothing really bad has happened, then that could go on for years. And I think that's something that students don't realize. They could go for years in the early or middle before they get into that really severe chronic phase. The medical model says, remember, that addictive disease is chronic and incurable. Yeah, I don't believe it, but that's because of all the other work that I do and the healing of it that I've seen. Yeah, and this is true. So if they flip-flop from alcohol to drugs or vice versa, a lot of the same behaviors will continue because they are indicative of high-risk choice. And so your behavior is going to fall right back into that category because you've learned it. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Here's some criticisms, right? Research is definitely flawed. It denies any responsibility of the person because it's like, oh, it's a disease. I have a disease. Well, I'm just going to keep using because I have a disease. A lot of times it makes us treat it in the same way, which is really unfortunate. Concept is that it's like a loss of control and that you don't have any control over it, which is true in some. It's true because once you get into craving state, like we talked about with Pavlov's dog, like once that bell is rung, we're off to the races and your limbic is in reward and it's already high and it's not going to stop until it gets the drug or the drink, probably, because it's almost like, have you ever passed by, I think we talked about this class and it was maybe one of the students said something about passing by the pantry so many times if the cookies are in there, you can't withstand it. And that's because you're getting triggered, limbic, reward, craving. And eventually you're going to stop at the pantry and get the cupcake. But I don't know if any of you have like made up your mind, like you're sitting in the living room and you know that there's 10 cupcakes in there and you decide, we've had one cupcake, right? And it hasn't really satiated you. So you're sitting there watching TV and you just know you're going to get that other cupcake. And like, have you ever gone in there and someone else has eaten the cupcake? Like, how mad are you that the cupcake's gone? And like, then you're looking for anything in the pantry you can to find some other type of sweet. And maybe you go to like the semi-sweet chocolate morsels or you get desperate. I mean, I'm not speaking from experience or anything. But you get to that point and you kind of get like you would if you were looking for a drug or a drink. And so it's because of the way that your brain works. So, but prior to that, you have total control, right? You could have not brought the cupcakes in the house. You could have, I I don't know, put them in the refrigerator and gotten something indifferent, like a Twizzler maybe, or something salty or healthier or a fruit, and maybe that would have satiated you. You see that this is the critique, right? And with the medical model, one of the worst things about it is the real problem is not addressed, which is typically the trauma. The reason why we use. No one in second grade is sitting there and drawing like, hey, I want to be an alcoholic or an addict when I grow up. Nobody aspires to be that. Even and as an adult, they don't want to be the way they are, but they just don't know how to get out of it. And it's so painful to stop because it works. It escapes, it heals, it distracts from the reality of your life. And if your life is really, really terrible, then why wouldn't you use? So it's almost a productive way to survive versus kill yourself, because yes, you're slowly dying, but you are making your life more tolerable. So when you think about treating it and reversing that, you can't just stop using and be in misery. It is miserable at first, but it's a progressive build to getting the life back. And that is why we lose people so quickly. If we could stick with it and get them to stick with it and give them enough medicine and enough support to get them through to start seeing the positive outweigh the negative, then people usually don't go back. Chronically, they relapse is very common. I mean, all people relapse. And so that, I think that's a huge thing that I want everybody to know. Don't treat anybody with addiction like they're not going to relapse. That's not, it's counterintuitive to what we know about biology. Like, you are going to relapse, but it's what you do with the relapse that matters, not that the relapse happens. Great. I hope you don't, but you probably are. So we just prepare for that, right? And that's the opposite of this is all the stuff I've learned over all the years. I mean, I have so many years of substance abuse experience, and I'm really burnt out on it, actually. But I've studied hundreds of different models and treatments and court systems and all the drugs and the alcohol. And I've worked with heroin. I've worked with lots of meth and cocaine and crack and marijuana and alcohol, lots of alcohol, extensive experience with alcoholism. So, one thing that I love about one of the treatment models that I started to work on, which was relapse prevention, RPP, that I got trained and went for a week and got trained in it, and it planned for the relapse. And I feel like that we do a relapse prevention plan, but then we do a relapse post-relapse plan. So if you relapse, and what do you do first? What am I going to do, number one? What am I going to do, number two? Who am I going to call? What am I going to do? What can I do? So that I get right back on track versus spiraling, because that's where you really lose the people. Okay. Medical model advantages: removes the moral stigma. It is treatment that can be covered by insurance now because of the disease model. There was a growing interest in research. It does allow the person who's suffering from addiction to understand their brain is altered, and it really is altered, and their body's altered. And when we look at Amen's SPECT scans on the brain, you can see large areas of the brain affected and not working. At all. The neurons are not connecting. So we know that the brain is dramatically changed, but we also know that reverses over time with recovery. Abstinence is a logical treatment objective, but not necessarily anything I ever go for. I know that might be controversial, and it's fine. And it's controversial with people that I even work with at my own clinic. I'm a harm reductionist in that I feel very strongly that any hurdle that we cross is positive. So if I have a client who's drinking a bottle of whiskey every week and they go to a bottle of wine a week, I am excited, because that's a huge difference in the alcohol content. A client who smokes 3 packs a day and we're down to a half a pack, that's a win. That's less going into your system. So we can talk about that all we want, and we will. Okay, just more disadvantages of the medical model. Yeah, purely medical treatment, not helpful, right? That's one piece of a huge pie. When this is a collaborative planning for the client. I mean, there's self-help, there's a doctor, there's a psychiatrist, there's a counselor, there's the brain, there's the diet, there's the exercise, there's the sleep, there's the trauma, there's the risk family, there's the Al-Anon for the family, there's the right? And there is some responsibility from the person for any kind of disorder, right? I mean, if I'm trying to lose weight, I mean, I have part of that responsibility. If I am, trying to do better in school, that is partly my responsibility. So yeah. Okay. Well, y'all are probably tired of hearing me talk about all this. All right. There's evidence to support the medical model. We know there's a genetic predisposition with alcohol, but it's also, so we know there's a genetic component, and we know that the brain shows us this. Alcoholics are genetically predisposed to produce THIQ in response to alcohol. There's abnormalities in the dopamine receptor gene, clearly, because we have infused it and secreted it to ad nauseum. And then, of course, deficiencies in our neurotransmitter receptors, which why I always say SSRIs are very important in treatment. I don't care what anyone really says, but someone coming off drugs and alcohol, they need psychotropic meds to make it easier on them, because they're depleted and it really sucks and they don't feel good. They don't feel good. And if you don't feel good, why wouldn't you use again? I mean, hello. Okay. So biological and genetics, right? We're into the genetic model. So other substances, comorbidities that are usually going to occur, which suggest genetic predisposition, or alcoholism, ADHD, which makes sense because you struggle focusing, Tourette's, personality disorders, because where do they come from? Trauma, and they are comorbid with addiction, right? Depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. Of course, alcohol is really nice if you're super anxious. It calms you down, and people really like that. And depression, it can help you, give you some energy. Drugs might give you some energy, make you less socially anxious. Right? So, okay. I say right, like you guys are sitting in front of me listening to, but you be listening to me. You better listen to this, because if everything I've had going on past, 72 hours, somebody better make time to listen to this. Okay. Biological and genetics, part 4. The strengths for this is, yes, there's research. We know there's genetic link. There are intergenerational studies already done that we know that, hey, if my parents are alcoholics and my grandparents, that increases my risk. The ACEs study, the Average Childhood Experiences study, we know that puts us at risk. Here's the thing that I love to talk about. Is it the genetics? Is it the environment? What do we think? I know we can have a genetic predisposition for trauma. And my wonder is the genetic predisposition for trauma, the genetic link with the hypothalamic pituitary axis, adrenal axis, reduced gray matter at birth, that's from trauma. Is that the same as this? And it just makes us have a little smaller stress tolerance. So when we are born to someone with PTSD or inherent trauma in their family line that they have not addressed, it is passed down to us in a reduced window of stress tolerance. What that means is we react more strongly to stressors, such as a pen falling on the floor, or ink running out, or the cookie not being there when I want to eat it. We don't have the reserves that maybe others do that they can calm themselves down more quickly and have more balance. That would also put us at risk for using if we have a small window of stress tolerance, because alcohol and drugs would help expand that or heal some of that for the time being. The systems, the systemic family model, the maintenance of homeostasis in the family system. The family system changes to accommodate the substance abuser. Substance abuse is both systems maintained and systems maintaining. So that our environment, who's using in our environment growing up? Is our family an alcoholic family? What are the boundaries like? Who is aligned with who? Am I the child that's going to be perfect so that I don't rock the boat? Am I the child that's going to rock the boat and show the sickness of the family? Children of alcoholics often have these issues: low self-esteem, lack of trust, shame, decreased sense of self, and then, of course, themselves an increased risk of alcoholism because that's what they've been watching all along. The strengths of this model, the systemic family model, is the focus on relationships, making behavior more amenable to change, and then addressing the family, all the systemic family issues, right? There's conflicting research, it's ethnocentric, and it has a limited empirical base for if this is the reality. The behavioral model, and now this is where I believe there's a lot of truth to this as well. So what you're going to see at the end is really, it's a little bit of all of these. And I say that because the moral model, there is some of that too. And the reason I don't want to berate people because of morality, but I know what addiction does cause you to violate your morals and values eventually. And that is the piece that helps us get people well, because they don't like the way that feels. Maybe they cheated on their spouse. Maybe they embarrassed their children. I've had clients, ruin children's weddings or not be there for births. And that kind of stuff sticks with you and can be a powerful motivator for change. So I don't want to discredit or discount any of these models. And in fact, I think the reason addiction treatment is so complex is because it's actually all of these models. It's all of it. And it's definitely learned behavior. There's a learning component, but it's also being rewarded, right, with the way you feel. And so I'm getting ahead of myself, aren't I? Let's see, here we go. So you're rewarded in your brain. And then there's a social learning theory, right? This helps me feel better. I can react differently. I can handle more. I can go to this party and be fun, and everyone loves me when I've had a few drinks and I'm feeling good, and that I'm getting positive feedback and people like me like this, right? And so it's really backed up with a reward, if you will, and it's like the little mice that we're given a treat to. So this behavioral model is easily observed and measured. The treatment plans are easily formulated with the learning theory, and we relearn. That's where Pavlov, etc. This is where we use that. Stop what are the triggers? Change our behavior, change going around them, etc. So this is definitely a component. But again, this behavioral model neglects family biology and genetics, which we can't neglect. We know those are they all factors, right? And so is this. What's your environmental support? What did you learn from your family, your religion, your culture, your peers? What is everybody doing? What does everyone in your family system do and your friends? Do they all believe that you should drink all the time? Do they not? It's all looking at the sociocultural aspect. And like I said, here we are. But really, it's this. This is the reality. Okay, so we have all these separate models, but the reality is it's all of it. I hate to break it to you, but it's everything. It is the genetics. It is the environment. It is the family. It is the moral. It is the disease. It is the blah, blah, blah. The most sociocultural. It's all of it. Okay, so it's an integrated biopsychosocial model. It's all of it. this is an interaction of all of it. And like I said, it's so complex, and you can't forget any of these factors when you're treating. None of it. You've got to have everybody on board. And if you want to do this work, it's exhausting, but it's also rewarding if you know what you're doing. And it's hard, but when you get a success case and you hear 15 years down the road, someone thanks you for the work that you did with them, it is, it's indescribable, a feeling that, you help facilitate that. And then our clients do the work, but you're facilitating it. And sometimes I feel like the clinicians don't get enough credit, because it's you that's coming up with the plan. It's you that's listening to the client. It's you that's trying everything you can, often harder than they are, to help them. You're pulling the family in. You're giving them resources. You're giving them meetings. You're asking how it's going. You're going them to the doctor. You're giving them drug tests or sending them for a drug test. You're educating them about the brain. You're trying to heal the trauma. You're trying to come up with a relapse prevention plan and trying to make sure they don't die, either passively or actively. So it's a lot, but it's rewarding as well. One widely accepted view in the psychological model is that drug use is secondary to another psychological condition. That's 100% true. I don't care what anybody says. Most people have something going on. Everyone. The reason they use is for a reason. And one of the best questions you can say is, what do you like about it? And my clients look at me strangely sometimes when I ask that question. What do you like about heroin? Right? Why not meth? What do you like about meth? What does it do for you? What do you like about alcohol? Like, how does it help? And if you start that way, you find out what is the answer, right? When I drink that drink, I escape. I did a qualitative study with a Vietnam veteran who did 3 tours in Nam. And he was a chronic alcoholic who was in DUI court. He kept getting DUIs. He's the nicest guy. I just adored that client. I don't even know if he's still alive. I would love to find out how he's doing. He came back to me in the PhD, and I actually did EMDR with him on Vietnam. And it was really okay, because he had been my DUI court client before I was trained in EMDR, and I got some grant money because I thought, this guy, I don't know what this program's not touching what this guy's got going on. Right? He's drinking because of everything that happened. And I won't share what he did. I mean, because I'm mindful of re-traumatizing everyone, but it was horrific stuff that I listened to. But I did a qualitative study on him for my qualitative research class in my PhD, and he said the word escape 65 times. And I didn't even catch it. But a qualitative study, when you go back and do a particular kind of study, you're looking for themes in the recording. And so it's tedious work, but you're listening in like 1-2 sentences at a time, and you're looking for patterns or words being repeated to pull out of that dialogue. And so 65 times he said escape. And he didn't know it, and I didn't know it till I went back and evaluated the tape. But if that tells you anything, escape. I mean, we weren't even just talking about one thing. We're talking about lots of things, and he's talking about his relationship with alcohol. Addictive personality is bogus. I missaid something else. Bogus, not true. There is no such thing. I don't believe in it. That's not true. If we have an addictive personality, every single person in this program and everywhere else on the planet has it, because everybody's got something they can't give up. So what that is maybe someone who's traumatized. Okay, I'm done. Bravo. Y'all better listen to this.